I think you're really going to enjoy our show today. Today we have John Bromley. He's the founder and CEO of Charitable Impact. It's an online donor advised fund, and it's great. It takes sort of the lessons from entrepreneurship. It also shows us what clients want and how they want to give to charities and how that makes them feel good. And it also talks a little bit about how you can incorporate that into your wealth management practice. So we all try to give back to the communities that we serve. I know I try hard. I know a lot of people who want to give back to their communities. And on previous podcasts, I've talked to how advisors, not only within IPC, but also in the wealth management area, not only give back to their communities in Canada, but sometimes around the world. We've heard some great stories about some philanthropy that we've done, but philanthropy can also be harnessed as a game-changing strategy for client relationships, for legacy planning, and for business growth. Some advisors have made it a major part of their business model, and many advisors have clients that have charitable donations as major part of their wealth plan going forward. So today, to talk about what I think is a very, very incredibly important topic, today I have John Bromley. John has a very unique perspective on this topic, and he's built something pretty cool and awesome as a platform, to help both donors and their advisors rethink generosity. And I think it's a pretty cool thing of what he's done. So who is this John Bromley guy? He's the founder and CEO of Charitable Impact. It's Canada's first fully online donor-advised fund that has facilitated over $1.5 billion of charitable giving, which is incredible. I think in the short time that you've been going, it's fantastic. John is passionate about simplifying philanthropy and empowering individuals to create meaningful change in their communities. With his background in corporate finance and a lifelong connection to the charitable sector, he's in a unique position to look at both sides of this equation. And he's going to share his insights on both generosity and the future of giving. So, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. You've set the table well.
No, as I said, I've been looking forward to this. It's something that I think is on everyone's mind, including my own. I get busy and everyone gets life in the way. We want to give back to our communities, and we're never really sure on how to go about it. So why don't we start with the basics, John? How did you get here? How did your journey lead you to this spot on this podcast?
Well, thank you for the invitation to be here, which is, I guess, ultimately the answer, right? But so I'm out of Vancouver, Canada. I went to school on the other side of Canada, and I studied commerce, and I went straight into business, and I really loved it, by the way. But I had this intersection with my dad, which was quite natural. I mean, he's still my dad today. And he was one of the pioneers of charity law in Canada. And despite no plan for this to happen, our paths just continued to intersect. And eventually I started working with him, which is where I learned almost everything I know about charitable giving, which is actually something that's like, where do you go to learn about giving, right? So I had this, this family kind of connection to philanthropy, not just as a culture of a family who did give money away, but also, a dad who was professionally engaged in the space. And that's really where I learned deeply about, giving and working with people who are trying to give back. And that led me to Charitable Impact, which is what which is what I do today, which is what I founded. And generally speaking, why I got led to Charitable Impact was because there's nowhere for people to go to get, objective, kind of neutral advice about their giving. You said it yourself. How do you go about doing it? People don't really know that. That's really what Charitable Impact is here to help answer.
Well, I love that. And so it's the sort of entrepreneurial journey that we talk about a lot on this show, which is, found a need. This is great. It was in the family, and it is something that is a specialty. Like, it's things that, normal people just don't know unless they take the time to know about it. So talk about Charitable Impact. Like, what is it exactly, so that everyone can sort of get their minds around what is it that you and your company do for both advisors and their clients?
Well, so Charitable Impact donor-centered tool. It's a tool built for donors, right? And that was purposeful when we started. It was to say, who's out there servicing people and companies who give money away. And so we built a donor advised fund. And a donor advised fund is a unknown but very common tool in the charity sector. And what it is, if you think about it like a bank account for charitable giving.
Okay.
It's your own giving fund. It's your own giving tool. So you put the money into it and you get a tax receipt right away.
Okay.
You can then hold the money from there. You can make investments from there, which is where advisors come in. And you can then recommend money to be given from your fund, granted to basically any registered charity of your choice, right? So at Charitable Impact, you put the money in, you get tax sheet right away. You can then hold the money, you can invest the money, and you can then say, hey, I want it to go to this charity this much. I want it to go some to go to that charity that much. So just like a bank account for charity, it helps you organize and centralize all your giving, and it also separates the donation, which you get the tax receipt for, from how you actually want that money to create impact in community. And that's important because they're two different thought processes, in my opinion.
Well, that is, and that's very interesting. So you can take like 100 grand, let's say, you had it just sitting around doing nothing, or part of your investments, and we'll talk a little bit more about, in-kind charitable and that sort of thing. You put it into this, you can invest it, within a range of investments. And then you can say, hey, give so much to this, give this so much to this. As long as they're registered charities, it becomes your vehicle for I guess it can last. Is there any restrictions on time? Is there restrictions on how much you can put in?
There's no restrictions on how much you can put in. I mean, every donor advised fund will have their own policies. At Charitable Impact, there's no restriction on how much you can put in. There's more likely to be restrictions on the lower end, actually. At
Yes.
Charitable Impact, there's not. We've built Charitable Impact purposefully to be inclusive of anybody who wants to give. So our minimum donation is $5, but our accounts get into the tens of millions of dollars.
I bet, because it would be interesting. You can now have a place, sort of I can call it your own trust, but it is a charitable thing that, and it doesn't have to go to one charity, right? It can go to several charities or, different charities per year, that kind of thing. There's a lot of flexibility to it, I would understand.
That's correct. And that's why it's such a good tool. You take your $100,000 example and you say, do I want to give $100,000? How do I want to pay for that 100,000? Is it going to be cash? Is it going to be public stock? Is it going to be private company shares? It could be real estate. How am I going to pay for it? And then separately, how are you going to use that $100,000 of value to create impact? Oh, I want to give some to this charity. I want to give some to that charity. I want to do this anonymously. I want to do this more publicly. Really, it's a tool built for the donor to help support them as they go about giving. And it's rare for someone who's engaged with charitable giving to only give to one charity. And partly because it's rare for us as human beings to stay exactly the same as we age, particularly given all the stuff that's going on around us that also changes, right? We change, but the world also changes. And as the world changes or as we change, the charities that we choose to support change.
I like it. So it gives a lot of flexibility. You can put it in. Now let's explore this also concept I found interesting, and I'm sure most of my listeners would find interesting. It doesn't have to be cash per se. As you said, it could be securities you could put into there. It could be shares of a private company. It could be real estate. So maybe talk a little bit about, some examples there that you've seen where people have used this advantageously. And as you know, most of my audience is probably financial advisors. How could they utilize this in their practice? I think there's a good little concept that we can explore.
Yeah, so this topic can, get into crazy tax talk, complexity, but we can keep it quite simple. So the first thing is people can only give what they have, right? So, the more you have, the more diversity of the assets you have, the more you can choose which assets to give. So, but if you only have cash, start with cash. It's
Cash is
easy.
good.
Okay. But if you have, other assets, then you can start to look at, are there assets that you want to kind of sell or get rid of? And also looking at what's most tax advantageous. So for example, in Canada, using publicly traded securities right? So securities that trade on a public exchange is the most tax efficient form of giving. Okay. And the reason for that is because if there's any appreciated securities are the most tax advantaged form of giving, because the appreciation is kind of wiped out. The capital gain is ends up being excluded, and so you get a full tax receipt and you don't use any of it, which is the exclamation for the tax minded people in there. But what that means for advisors is that advisors are sitting on and advising on the securities that is the type of asset you should be using to give away if you own it.
Right.
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 And then the advisor can get involved with that part of the person's life and add extraordinary value along the way.
No, that as I said, when you really think about it, you must have a lot of clients who would have, large capital gain build up, and to your point, might be in publicly traded securities, capital gains, private real estate, but let's stick with the publicly traded. You can move it in, get a tax receipt for the whole thing, and it defers out the capital. Well, it gets rid of the capital gain, right?
It doesn't defer it; it gets
Yeah,
rid
it
of
gets
it.
rid of it.
Yeah,
It's not even a
yeah.
deferral. So that's a very interesting tax plan that I bet a lot of advisors, as I said, may know on the periphery, but this is a platform that can actually help you execute on that.
Thanks for saying that. So, because Charitable Impact is relatively unique in that we're not affiliated directly with a bank. So, some donor advised funds are. So we talk to our donors, and they can recommend working with their own investment advisor. And what that also means is that we can go to the investment advisor and start working with them, and then they can take Charitable Impact out to their clients, and while managing the money that comes in along the way. And so we like that because what it means is that we don't have to ask people to change and make big decisions. They can stay within the platforms that they're already used to, work with the people they already know and trust, and make giving just a part of what they're already doing. And that's really actually important because when you make giving a part of your sort of day to day, you're way more likely to stay engaged with it.
Well, and to your point, you're actually making it that much easier. You're dealing with the realm of trust that you've already established. You're dealing with, probably investments that you're already comfortable with. You're just looking for a vehicle so that you can help your community and help other people, which I think most people are motivated to do. As I said in the beginning, I think one of the challenges is we're just unsure about the path to take to do it effectively. And you sort of, as an entrepreneur, sort of taken that as a need in the world and built a platform around that. So that's fantastic. So let's go back on that entrepreneur thing. You most entrepreneurs, when you talk to them, they built something for themselves. You built something not only for yourself, but to help others with that need to give money away. Maybe tell us why and what was the mind shift that moved you out of that corporate finance? As I said, you worked with your dad, so you had exposure to it. So I think we sort of get that journey. But what did you have to go through as an entrepreneur to get here?
Well, I appreciate that question, and I get asked questions like that a lot, and people kind of go, "Oh, that's so nice of you to do something in the charity space," and I kind of agree. Like, not just because I'm doing it, but someone's got to do it. But as an entrepreneur, it's what I know. So what I didn't do, and I want to be a good guy, by the way, at the end of this. But like what I didn't do was, but I'm just like everyone else. You know what I mean? Like, so what I didn't do, for example, was I didn't sort of have this moment in my life where I was like, oh, I need to stop, doing this type of corporate finance, which is maybe bad, which it's not, and start doing this
The good one
over here, which is good.
Stop bad, start good.
Yeah. And look, people do go through those moments in life, but that's not what happened with me. What happened with me was that I started learning more and more and more about charitable giving,
Right. So
because of this connection with my dad, who was also professionally engaged in the space, and I had somewhere to go, and I had somewhere to sit inside these meetings that were happening anyway, and learn and absorb and learn and absorb. And as I learned and absorbed, it became readily apparent that there was a real need for people to bring expertise and bring about more tools to serve donors in particular.
Right.
Right? Like, there was a very obvious need from my perspective that donors were not being served. right? So donors were getting sold to by fundraisers. Okay, fundraising is really important, but they don't work for the donor; they work for the charity that's going to get the money. And charity tools and CRM, you name the type of tool, it does exist in the charity sector, but there is just a real dearth of people that were focused on the donor, and
Right.
that's really, so that's what I saw. So traditional entrepreneurship, I guess, saw a need, understood a solution to the need, provided for the need. And it just happens to be in this charity space. So the only other thing I'd say there, Chris, is that so I'm actually just a normal entrepreneur, I would say.
Right.
It just so happens that the product and service that I'm involved with deals with that part of humanity which relates to giving back. And I get a lot of accolades for that, but they're not really well deserved.
Well,
If I'm
I
being
think
totally
that you
honest.
saw the need, and I bet a lot of people saw the need but didn't pursue it. Right. That's what always separates the entrepreneur from everybody else. Is they continue down the journey while many stop, or many say that's a good idea, but I'm going to leave it out to somebody else. Somebody else should do that.
Well,
So
thank you for
you
that.
have to at
I
least
do accept
congratulate
that.
yourself for
I
taking
did
it to this
start.
one.
Yeah, no, I did have that little bit of craziness that caused me to get over the line to start, and that is one of the things, if not the thing, that differentiates entrepreneurs from the people who choose to not do that.
Absolutely, and it is to your point. It's a need, and I'm going through the same journey myself. You look at, you get to a certain point in your life where you're like, okay, so what am I going to do with my money, not only today but tomorrow, and what are the things that are available to me to make that happen? And to your point, there wasn't really a big facility out there or any one spot you could go to learn about it. You had to learn bits and pieces. So your platform more or less. You know brings it together. So as you were building it, you must have learned some pretty valuable lessons. What are some of the lessons that you learned? The things, the ones I'm always most interested in is if I knew then what I knew now, here's what I would have done differently. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, in terms of running the company, I would have changed some things. I mean, it's so easy with hindsight to recognize your mistakes in particular, and it's important just to learn from them. The main thing that relates to both team members, and I got a great team, and clients or donors. I think the main thing I would have done differently and hopefully better is really focus on education. Charity's not unlike other stuff in that, if you don't ever cook, you're not going to know how to cook, right?
Right.
If you don't go hit balls at the driving range, you're not going to be able to hit a ball very well. So if you don't do charity, you're generally not going to know how to go about doing it. One of the things that maybe differentiates charity a little bit is related to a belief system of mine that I think is real and true, which is that generosity is really natural. Like, as human beings, we're naturally generous. We're social beings. We know that we need help, and we get joy from helping others. So that's natural. But what happens if you don't nurture nature, right? What happens if you don't sort of, an example I use a lot is with athletics. So it's like, you're born naturally athletic, but if you never play sports, you're never going to become, an athlete at all. So giving's a little bit like that. And so in that context, I would have spent a bit more time on educating people. And the recognition is that, just because it's natural doesn't mean you understand it. It just means that it's in you, right?
Right.
And so the part of education I would have focused on, or where I would have applied education, was, and I'm still trying to do this today, but kind of getting at that nature of generosity within you, and creating the pathway for you to start acting on it so that you can get better and better at it along the way and learn yourself from the mistakes you make.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that's an important lesson for all entrepreneurs to learn is that education, that build up that knowledge, because that just spreads, right? When you teach two people, they teach two people, and so on and so on, and it goes on and on from there. So now let's move to the advisors. As I said, that's the bulk of my audience, and they're probably listening, saying, "Okay, this sounds fantastic. So how do I go about helping my clients understand what their sort of charitable mandate is and how it fits into their wealth management, and then how can I work with charitable impact to bring that to life for my clients. So maybe describe that, and you can illustrate with a story or whatever you think is effective to get people to bring it to life in their own businesses.
Well, the first thing I say is, focus on what you're really good at. So one of the reasons why a bunch of financial advisors who are incredibly financially literate don't talk to their clients about charitable giving is because they themselves don't understand charitable giving well enough. And it comes from a good place. There's like, well, if I don't understand bonds, I'm not going to talk to you about bonds. So if I don't understand charitable giving, I'm not going to talk to you about charitable giving. So either you cut it out, which is what I don't recommend you do, because all of your clients have this nature of generosity. It's an opportunity. But do focus on what you're good at, and that's where working with charitable impact is important, because you can come along and say, hey, here are the people who are really comfortable at talking to you about your philanthropic journey, right? So, for example, it's not necessarily, whereas it is an advisor's job to sort of choose stocks, just to simplify it,
Use
right?
that, yeah.
It's not their job to choose the charities, right? So really what you want to focus on the advisor is talking to your client about, are you interested in philanthropy? Do you know that there are tax advantages to giving philanthropy, particularly with, for example, publicly traded securities, right? So the advisor wants to educate themselves, and we can help them with this, on sort of the different ways to start the conversation about philanthropy with their client. The two big ones are, do you care about something in the world, and how can we help you start sort of putting together a charitable nest egg kind of, to service that. And then the other part is the tax advantage side, right? Like, for example, if we've got gains and we want to sell some things because we want to be out of this thing that's got all the gains, should we just be like donating, 20% or something like that, just by definition, right? To help with some of the tax. So those are the two major areas. And then they would want to work with someone like Charitable Impact or another donor advised fund so that they can, as you say, Chris, actually carry it out.
Right, right. The actual execution of it.
The actual execution, right? And even in that, still stay focused on what you're best at. So you're good at the client relationship, you're good at the investment management, the stewardship of those assets. So do that. And when you're managing charitable dollars from an investment perspective, it's not any different than managing any other asset. Like an asset, the asset doesn't change just because it's charitable. or said differently, if it does change, it changes in the way that you can spend it. It doesn't change, what it is. So you can still sell
right. You will need some
Vitalis
liquidity at some point to actually give the money.
Of course, right. So the story component would be, you've got a client, and all clients kind of look different, but they fit into some boxes, right? So you have a client who's maybe they're religious or they're really engaged with their community. Hey, so you go to your client, hey, how can I help you, achieve those goals more readily? Do you know about a donor advised fund as a tool? Do you know that, we can give now up front and plan for that and then let you allocate out on your own? Maybe you have a client that's got big capital gains. Maybe you have someone who's, just come into wealth because they've had a liquidity event, like sold their company, right? So the key really is to understand who your clients are and how and why they might be philanthropic, like being religious versus having a liquidity event. And then entering that conversation and saying, there's this pie of assets. One slice of it for you might be philanthropy. How can I help you manage that?
I think it's worth the conversation almost with everybody, but certainly your higher net worth clients, because it has to be on their mind. Like, to your point, it's something that people are naturally inclined to do, is they give away, especially people who are successful. There's also that whole guilt thing that that occurs with some people who are successful or come into big windfalls, and all of a sudden their mind turns to charity. Certainly, I think the advice I would give advisors is make it part of your process. And so that, everybody over an X net worth, you have this conversation with them about charity and what they plan to do, and if they plan to, go down this path, and then they have already access to a platform such as yourself, and to your point, there's others, but such as yourself, to help them go through that process. Because if you make something a system, it'll be done all the time. If you do one-offs, you'll do one, two, and then it'll sort of, another flash in a plan or another squirrel will come along and chase their attention. So if you make it part of your wealth planning process, I think that would be a good way to implement it.
I couldn't agree more. I think actually you've said it better than I have, to make it part of your process. The key is, so many times people are kind of like, well, what charities do you like? And it's not that there's anything wrong with that question, but it's not where I would start. It's kind of more like, is charitable giving of interest to you, both either on the create impact in community, even if you don't know what that is yet, and or on the tax side. And advisors are excellent at that kind of stuff. So sort of stay in that lane. The advice is really stay in the lane of what you're good at. And then when you recognize you don't have all the answers, just like everyone else in the world,
right?
Kind of go, oh well, who can help them, answer that. And that's where someone like Charitable Impact will come in and say, like, look, we, in the same way we kind of understand the stock market, but we're not super fluent in it. We feel very fluent in the charity space, very comfortable having any type of conversation in there. And generally speaking, that works really well with we work with over 150 different advisor teams across Canada.
Fantastic.
And that works really, really well.
Well, I would see it. So one of the things I say on this podcast all the time is, delegate, outsource, and systemize. So when you find something that's really cool, you got to delegate it. Somebody's got to do it. You got to outsource it, because it's always better to have an expert outside than it is for you, and make it part of your process so that you implement it easy. And I think, as I said, this is a great process that is something that inherently is in most people's minds. Again, it's the complication that gets to actually implement it. In fact, when I went on your website, I loved it. The first thing I saw is everyone has something they want to change in the world. And I think that to some extent that's true. I love that quote. And maybe, is that how, was that developed, or was that something that you just saw in people and then started to use as your principle?
We literally refer to that as we have 3 beliefs, and that's the first one. So the 3 beliefs are: everyone has something that they want to create change for in the world. And I think that's true.
I think it's true as well.
There's something you want changed.
Yeah, I've yet to meet somebody who didn't want to change something.
This is why it's a belief. And so the second belief is everyone has something to give towards creating that change, right? Whether it's with your money, your time, or your talents, right? Or all 3. So
right.
You have something you want to change, and you have something to give towards creating that change. And the third belief is, when you do that, when you give, you yourself get something in return.
It's true. And as I said, I can, from my own experiences, the greatest impact, or the greatest, as much as, I've done charitable work, I've been to Honduras, I've done these things, and people always, oh, that's great. And I go, it's actually, I do it for more selfish reasons. It's because, to your point, the feeling that people get from giving back is something that is hard to recreate in other activities. So it's sort of one of those things that plays on itself. Once you do it once, then you want to do it again, and then you want to do it again, because you get the adrenaline rush from it as much as the people who you are giving benefit from it.
Well, Chris, I think you've, again, said it maybe better than I have. So, here you are in your lane. But, I think that point is a really important one, right? And where this idea of like the selfish side of giving, right? And selfish is, unfortunately, this word that's got lots of negative connotation around it. Mm-hmm. But if you can put that aside, and so maybe we should find a better word for it. But it's like, what do you do in life regularly and stay involved with that you don't get some selfish type of joy from, right? I mean, I work out because, it makes me feel better, and it like helps me live longer, and these things. So, I mean,
yeah, it makes
great,
me look good.
awesome.
That's why people do
it. Makes me look good. I mean,
that's really what we do.
Person, right? So, I mean, we want people to recognize that, like, in this really selfless act of giving, it's really important that you do things that are selfish enough to stay involved with, right? Oh man, my grandpa died of cancer, or this health issue is in our family. I really don't want anyone else to experience that. That's where I want to focus my time, my talents, and my money to give back to. Oh gee, you're so selfish for focusing on that disease and not this other disease. Well, no, it's what you're really interested in, right? So a different way to say it is, when you get involved with giving, it's really important, in my opinion. I hope this sounds obvious, but to give to what you love, right? Like if you're really into the environment, give there. Two big reasons: one, you love it, you're more likely to stay with it, and second, you're going to be better at it.
Right. It's like
Right. So
everything,
how do you
right? Yeah.
exactly, you're going to be better. How do you create? People always ask, well, how do I know my gift is going to make a difference? Well, the more likely you're gonna have an answer to that when you understand the context that you're giving to and the organization you're giving to. You're very unlikely to have a good answer to that when someone approaches you on the street, or you get onto a phone call and someone asks you to give to a charity that you've barely ever heard of, right? So it's on you as the donor, actually, to understand your impact. It's not just always the charity's fault for not telling you exactly what happened with your money.
Actually, that is a really good point. And it's something we talk about, just, the why, the passion. If you have that for a particular area, and to your point, when it was something dear in your own life, whether, a loved one passed away from cancer, or, you've seen an actual impact, or there's plenty of people that I know that have had some tragedies that needed that. Or, and to your point in selfish, I've gone to other countries, as I said, gone to Honduras, when people are like, well, you should give more money in Canada. I'm like, yeah, but have you been to Honduras? Like, it's a bit different. So when you have that passion, it's one of those things that continues to fuel itself. So you've probably seen that time and time again, I would bet.
They're always the best donors. The people who are involved giving to what they're passionate about are always the best donors.
So is there any success stories you can share with our audience, something that you've seen where an advisor has said, well, I'm going to implement this into my business, I'm going to start talking to my clients about that, and then not only have they had great accolades from their clients, but they've felt good about what they're doing? Have you had anything that you can really share that get people thinking down this path?
Well, yeah. We have a lot of stories, and I'll tell you the stories that I that are the ones that I love. So everyone's in the advisor community in particular, in the investment advisor world in particular, they kind of go, oh well, charity's probably only relevant to my wealthiest clients. And so the stories I love are the people who start there in that really intuitive space, and there's nothing wrong with starting there, okay? And then as they get their head around the donor advised fund in particular, and as they get around how they can service their clients, and publicly traded securities are the most effective form of giving. And they do a combination of, I think, two things. One is they look at their client and go, like they're getting a lot more joy and involvement out of this than just a tax receipt. And secondly, they think about them. So they think about their client and their experience. But then they also think about themselves and they go, like I'm a charitable person too.
Oh, wait a minute. What about me?
And so what I love to see is they start to kind of understand that the reality that, like, charitable giving, if you choose to participate, is fairly democratized. It's open and accessible to everyone. And so you have these clients who start with, like, oh well, I've got one or two clients with a charitable impact account, and then the next thing you know, like, it usually takes a little while, but they're servicing 10 clients, and then they're servicing 20 clients, and then they're servicing 30 clients. I mean, generally speaking, I think all people who have any interest whatsoever in charity should be working with their financial advisor to help them manage their charitable giving. Because financial advisors add a lot of value, just beyond the asset management, and secondly, because giving publicly traded securities is the most tax advantageous form of giving. So if you own appreciated securities and you're using cash, like off your credit card, to pay for your charitable donations, you're costing yourself more money than you need to.
Right, than is necessary.
That's right. So yeah, they're in a sweet spot to really help. And actually, the other thing I'd say is, like, as a result of that, they can become really important to the charity sector in Canada. They can really help engage more people in giving. And what's really critical is that most people only give when they're asked. So if, like,
True.
the big university, or if your alma mater calls you up and says, "Hey, give to me," you might cut the check. But in a conversation with your financial advisor, it's a more private place, and it's an ask about, are you interested in getting involved, or are you involved with charitable giving?
Right.
And that's an easier thing to say yes or no to than, how about this charity? How about that charity? How about this charity? How about that charity? Right? So if we can figure out how to ask people to get involved in charitable giving without saying it's necessarily for this charity, then more people are going to be likely to participate. And that's certainly the experience we have at Charitable Impact.
Well, I think that too. And the other thing that it does is it opens up a new realm of relationship and conversation. We've had some people on the show who like specialize in this type of interaction with their clients. And what they all say is it's a very different conversation to talk about what people are passionate about and what they want to give to and what's dear to them than here's how the stock market's doing and here's how your statement's doing and you're saving good for retirement. Like the relationship that you build by talking about what people are passionate about, can only solidify it. And whether it's appropriate for them or not appropriate for them, it's the fact that you brought it up and had a conversation with your client, I think really solidifies that intimate relationship that advisors have with their clients.
It solidifies it, and as you say, it develops it. I mean, it's one of the best ways to get to know someone on a deeper level is to talk about what they are passionate about, right? And giving is one entryway into that conversation.
Or what's been impactful within their family. Like to your point, you can see where you've lost relatives to particular diseases that that type of opening up doesn't just happen in the general buy low, sell high type of conversation that happens in wealth management in some cases.
You've been to Honduras. What took you down there? What did you see? What did you experience? How many times have you been back? Have you been to other places in the world, or just that area? So yeah, no. We actually hear that from advisors quite a bit. That the giving related conversation. I mean, it's joy. It's cool and it's fun, but it ultimately also really helps them understand and get to know their clients better in a way that isn't always accessible when you're just talking about money.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So, John, I always ask. So now, what's next? What's next for Charitable Impact? What's next for you? What's next?
Well, one of the things that's next for Charitable Impact is. Well, earlier I talked about how most people only give when they're asked. So I'm really interested in how you figure out how to create scenarios where people are kind of quote asked to give, but still retain all their agency. And so we envision sort of taking Charitable Impact, for example, into workplaces.
I love
Right.
that.
So you can go to the employer, and then they can easily create, or with a donor advised fund, way more easily create a giving program that their employees or even their customers can participate in, but in a way where the company doesn't always have to choose the charity.
Right.
Because it's very rare, by the way, for two people to agree on the exact same charity. I mean,
Of
even if
anything.
you agree, well, yeah, like anything, but
Yeah.
even if you agree on the same cause, but you live in this part of the city and I live in that part of the city, it's highly likely that there's two different charities servicing, for example, homelessness in the north as opposed to the south of the city. So anyway, so for example, in places like employee, giving programs, you want the employee to be able to choose the charity, and the employer often just wants to help optimize that giving. So, for example, by matching. So I see a lot of that. I'm really interested in taking the donor advised fund tool into communities, to give communities a tool to create programs for giving in ways that represent who they are and what they want their community to achieve, both in terms of individual agency and what the people who are part of their community learn, but also in terms of what the community can go on to achieve through giving back and having charitable assets. And for what it's worth, one of the places where I learned that was by working with advisors. because they are kind of well, they are, in my opinion, a little community. Them with all of their clients. It's not that everyone knows each other, but there's this one to many relationship, and I've seen the impact advisors who get engaged with helping to facilitate their clients' charitable giving. I've seen the impact that they've had on their own business and their clients' lives, and it's inspiration for someone like me to kind of go, well, man, like how do we replicate that in other areas of life? So not just the wealth management life. So like the work life, the customer life. If you got kids who are going to school, how do they participate in
That
giving?
would be great. Yeah.
What about sports clubs, right? Things like that. So that's what's on the horizon for Charitable Impact, is taking the donor advised fund in to become a tool for communities to give.
That's exciting stuff. I can see the applications all over the place. So I think you're in the right spot, John. So if you listened to the show before, you might know that I do a rapid fire at the end. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and it's the first thing that pops into your mind. And the audience always loves this one. So the first question is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Don't fear failure.
I like it. Yeah. The motto of every entrepreneur, you're going to fail, but don't fear it.
Yeah, you gotta, the other way to say that is love it. And I've been given both, love the failure. I've been given both types of both types of advice, and I'm so good at failing all the time that it's like also like makes me feel better about myself.
I love it. Yeah, I used to say that, when I started in insurance and sales. They're like, "Are you afraid of a rejection?" I'm like, "I've been dating. I'm used to rejection." So now, and the next question is, what is the best book you've ever read?
Oh man, this is a hard one for me because I'm so terrible at remembering the names of books. I'm really good at, well, pretty good at remembering the content. Chris, I'm drawing a blank on this one. But you know what? Let me tell you one other thing about reading. I love reading. I love learning, and I love learning, but I don't love reading. And when I met the audiobook, my whole world changed.
That was
So
it.
can I answer the question that way by saying
Yeah.
my favorite book is any book
Is
that's on
anything you can
audio?
listen to?
I went from reading like 2 books a year begrudgingly, kind of going, oh man, to reading at least a book a month thanks to the audiobook. So
Well, the audiobook has changed a lot because also people, in commuting or, go to the gym or, it's an easy thing just to plug in. I, unfortunately, with my bad ADHD, cannot focus long enough to listen to anything for that long of a period. So I have to actually read, but everybody's
well,
different.
there you
But
go. Teach
I
their
do
own.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
On the topic of investing, and I just thinking about this because I just gave it to a buddy who's just getting into investing now. I really love the classic Psychology of Investing book, and I think there's a lot in that book that goes way beyond just the stock markets and stuff and gets you into humanity. So why don't we throw that one on the
I
table
like
for
that,
the
and
audience
I
who
would
might
also
recognize
agree
the
with
book?
that.
Yeah,
Because it's all about human behavior. It's never about the market itself. It's
yeah,
just about how people
yeah,
react
yeah.
to
I
it.
loved that one. Yeah.
And my last question to you is, what is your most impactful and memorable client interaction? That one that just pops in your mind where you're like, "Wow, I've done good," or this is I'm happy that this has worked out this way.
Let me answer that in a selfish way.
Absolutely.
I mean, just yesterday I sat down with someone who I'd never met before, and I walked away knowing more about the world than I did going in. So the selfish way I'm answering this is like so many of the interactions that are super memorable to me are the ones where I walk away going, "Oh my gosh, I learned so much." I actually
Right.
thanked this guy after, like, almost like he's a mentor after one meeting, kind of going like, "Thanks for sharing some of those things because it's really important to me, but you don't hear it out there enough." And then the other thing that there you can draw inspiration from is you don't always know. One of the things I've learned as an advisor, I mean, I'm a philanthropic advisor, is that you don't always know what actually impacts your clients. And it's moments like the meeting I had yesterday where I took away stuff, where you're reminded that, who knows what they necessarily took away, but you've probably impacted them in some way, and you want to aspire to do that, even if you don't always understand how.
Absolutely. And that's, in a lot of cases, that's what keeps us going is that, both the obvious and sometimes not so obvious ways that we impact people's lives and the positive ways that we impact people's lives. And you're certainly in a unique position that you can really impact not only people's lives, but whole areas of our society in a very positive way. So congratulations on your business and everything you're doing and continue to do. And I think you have some grand ideas there. So I always do a little summary of what I've learned. Great to have you on, John. And I always do a summary of what I've learned. And I've learned that, everyone has something they want to change in the world. I think that's absolutely a real thing. People have an innate desire to help their fellow people, to help the planet, to help various endeavors. And sometimes that's confusing. Some people don't know where to go or how to go about it or what even the tax implications are. They work with their advisors anyway. So this is a great extension to an advisor's practice and what they're doing with their clients, because we want to build deeper relationships. We want to help clients achieve the things that they've stated that they want to achieve, which will include charitable giving and giving back to their communities. And your platform helps them do that in a variety of different ways. And there are some tax benefits to it, and there are some financial planning benefits, but mostly it's about helping people hit their objective of giving back to the community. So I've learned a lot, and thank you very much for being on the show. Anything to add from what I've learned?
Well, with Charitable Impact, there's now somewhere you can go to have a discussion and to learn more about what you don't know about giving, right? So, Chris, you actually summarized it again very, very well. People have something they care about changing, and they know they have something to give towards creating impact for that. And they probably know they're going to have some fun along the way, but they don't necessarily know how to go about doing or where to start. And we want to really challenge people to that's not an excuse. You can go out there and you can get started, and you can work with people like us or others who can help you along the way.
And so how would people go about finding you, John?
Well, you can find us at charitableimpact.com. We're on social media at We Are Charitable. And, just reach out to us. We love hearing from people, and we're happy to have a conversation and talk about charitable giving, even if you're, new to us. And so everyone can be a philanthropist.
I love it. Thank you so much, John Bromley, Charitable Impact. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Chris.
So what do you do when it comes to charitable giving for your clients? Do you have a process? Do you have a methodology? I know when I was an advisor, we used to have this conversation with clients all the time. So I'd love to have a discussion with you. Let's do a virtual coffee. So if you want to talk about how to incorporate this into your business right now, just go to the show notes, click on the link, and we'll set something up.